Hey, check that. Walking flag of Ethiopia.
The man must have a red, gold and green and no pants to right.
What kind of terror? Yeah, Jay.
Star!
Eli, may I drink? Peace to the eye. Rastafari, one love.
Was brother Marcus Garvey really the first Pan-African revolutionary? Or was he really carrying on the tradition of Prince Hall Masons who dabbled in the politics of repatriation long before Garvey journeyed to America?
But there's evidence of a secret society. These Masons had broke away from the British on the cover, but were secretly linked to the British through secret Masonic lodges who were chartered by the...
During the American Revolution, the British were promising freedom and land to the black people who chose to join their ranks. As a result, thousands of black Americans took that chance, and after the war was over, at least 3,000 black British loyalists were evacuated to Nova Scotia, Canada, as part of Britain's resettlement efforts. In Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, black loyalists faced broken promises. Very few received the farmland they were promised, and many were forced into wage labor or even sharecropping. They endured racism, legal inequalities, and even mob violence, leading to widespread disillusionment with the promises that were made. In the year 1792, at least 1/3 of the black loyalists left Canada for Sierra Leone, led by a revolutionary by the name of Thomas Peters, a former soldier, and as well as John Clarkson, a British abolitionist. They founded Freetown, the first permanent colony of free slaves in West Africa, bringing with them many American customs as well as religious practices. These settlers became known as the Nova Scotian settlers, and their descendants helped form the Sierra Leone Creole identity. This migration was a powerful act of self-determination. It also reconnected them with Africans on the continent, and it shaped Sierra Leone's cultural and political foundations. Thomas Peters was one of the most compelling figures in the history of the black diaspora and the founding of Sierra Leone. His life reads like an epic of resistance, leadership, and transatlantic transformation. Born in 1738 in Nigeria, Peters was likely a member of the Yoruba clan. He was kidnapped and sold into slavery, eventually ending up in North Carolina, where he worked as a millwright. In the year 1776, inspired by Lord Dunmore's proclamation offering freedom to enslaved people who joined the British, Peters escaped and enlisted in the Black Pioneers, a loyalist military unit. He rose to the rank of sergeant, serving with distinction during the American Revolutionary War. After the war, Peters was evacuated to Nova Scotia, Canada, with other black loyalists. There he became a political leader, advocating for land and rights that had been promised but never delivered. He drafted many petitions and even traveled to England in 1791 to plead the case directly to the crown. In England, Peters connected with abolitionist Granville Sharp and the Sierra Leone Company, which was seeking settlers to rebuild its colony. Peters helped recruit nearly 1,200 black loyalists from Canada to resettle in Sierra Leone in the year 1792, becoming one of the founding fathers of Freetown. Despite his leadership, Peters clashed with many colonial authorities over broken promises regarding land distribution and governance. He died later that year in Freetown, but his legacy endures as a symbol of black resistance and self-determination. Thomas Peters is often called the first African-American hero and is remembered alongside figures like Elijah Johnson and Joseph Jenkins Roberts of Liberia as founding fathers of free African nations.
If Prince Hall chose the name African Lodge, one would assume that he was African. But was he? What about the other men who petitioned along with him? Were they African? But the spuriously applied proto-nationality wasn't the only contradiction within this supposedly benevolent organization. Because at its core, Prince Hall Freemasonry was anti-patriotic or anti-American, as most of the early Prince Hall Freemasons were British loyalists. One of the foundational tenets of Freemasonry is one must maintain an upstanding, law-abiding status of his inhabited society. Could any part of this foreign initiate revolution be considered espionage or conspiracy? As mentioned previously, British loyalists were among the groups of free colored people who were resettled in West Africa, especially the loyalists in Sierra Leone, following the British laws.
Hall Masons like Paul Cuffe played a pivotal role in the early efforts to repatriate free black Americans to Africa, especially in the context of settlements like Liberia and Sierra Leone. Their influence was rooted in a blend of spiritual conviction, fraternal solidarity, and Pan-African vision. Born in Massachusetts in the year 1759 to a free African father and Native American mother, Cuffe became a successful merchant and sailor, which was very rare for black men in early America. He was deeply committed to education, abolitionism, and uplift of the black American community. Though not definitely confirmed as a Prince Hall Mason, Cuffe operated within networks influenced by Prince Hall Freemasonry in the area of Massachusetts. This group emphasized self-determination, moral leadership, and embracing one's African heritage. In the year 1815, Cuffe personally financed and led a voyage that transported at least 40 free black Americans from Massachusetts to the colony of Sierra Leone. He envisioned a transatlantic commercial and cultural exchange where African Americans could thrive, free from racism, and contribute to building the African city. After returning, he engaged with the American Colonization Society, which aimed to resettle free slaves in Africa, though he died in the year 1817 before leading any other voyage.
Colonial era completely flies in the face of everything we've been told about the history of slavery in America. There are numerous documented examples of the free black population in certain counties in Virginia vastly outnumbering the recorded slave population. But as we've been spoon-fed lies by the American education system, which tells us that all so-called blacks were slaves taken from Africa, the truth had become hidden within subversive legalized terminology. These laws made the American Colonization Society's scheme of settling blacks in Liberia an attractive offer, prompting many free and already established so-called blacks to immigrate to Monrovia for what they thought would be a better life. One of these supposed free blacks wasn't really even black at all. According to Virginia historians, he was an octoroon, only being 1/8 black. But that is twice as black as he was allowed to be in the state of Virginia to pass for white. Joseph Jenkins Roberts' mulatto privilege card had an expiration date, and although he had acquired substantial wealth before the age of 20, somehow overcoming the hardships of being a black Virginia nigger, Joseph Jenkins Roberts rolled the dice of destiny, tempted fate, and immigrated to the new startup colony in Liberia, where there was an extremely high mortality rate. Charlton's Web, quote, among the settlers that arrived in 1822 to the future Republic of Liberia were a few Freemasons hailing from Negro lodges in the United States of America that were founded by Prince Hall. I'm going to stop here. There weren't many Prince Hall lodges in the South. So these Negro lodges in the United States of America that these men that you're going to find out became members of, they weren't in the South. However, certainly are from the South. After the lapse of a period extending over 40 years, the surviving Masons, who included a number of past presidents and vice presidents of Liberia, felt that the time had arrived for the formal organization of craft masonry in Liberia. In 1867, Thomas Amos Joseph Jenkins Roberts. Joseph Jenkins Roberts was from Virginia. At the time he left, there were no Masonic lodges in Virginia. So one would ask the question, what lodge made him a member? It wasn't a lodge in Virginia. Also, Beverly P. Yates, Charles S. Dunbar Sr., F. Johns, John N. Lewis, John Chivers, James C. Minor, John Says, James M. Priest, Samuel Glasgow, William S. Anderson, and Gabriel Moore assembled a convention in Monrovia, at which it was decided that Thomas Amos would spearhead the establishment of a Grand Lodge in Liberia. So most of the politicians in Liberia were Freemasons, especially the presidents, the first presidents, and possibly the subsequent presidents to follow. For example, Beverly T. Yates was the vice president, and there were other presidents of Monrovia who were also Freemasons. Subsequently, the necessary dispensation was acquired to launch Oriental Lodge No. 1 in Monrovia to enter, pass, and raise Freemasons according to the ancient customs and usages of the craft. Similar dispensations were also granted for the erection of 2 other lodges, now known as St. Paul Lodge No. 2 of the Clay Ashland settlement and St. John's Lodge No. 3, also of Monrovia. So they have multiple factions of Freemasons in Liberia, where the country has barely been established. Continuing, the Grand Lodge of Liberia was founded in 1867. By the 1970s, there were 17 subordinate lodges, and the majority of Liberia's high-ranking officials were Masons. Matters of the state were widely believed to have been decided within the lodges. Being a Mason was a veritable prerequisite for positions of political leadership in the true Whig Party. Liberia's Masons were criticized for their influence, as well as their exclusion of indigenous Liberians from their ranks. Think about the irony in that. These so-called African Americans returned to Africa only to exclude Africans from his special little European Masonic organization. That's irony. Quote, alongside the church's fraternal organizations, many of them importations from the United States or imitations of associations among the white population of America, played an important role in the maintenance of the social fabric of the society in Liberia. Among the organizations established were the Ancient and Free Accepted Masons of the Republic of Liberia, founded in 1867, and the Grand United Order of Oddfellows, founded in 1888. Membership in these organizations was an important status symbol, and their historical role in Liberian polity has yet to be adequately studied. Among the Grand Masters of Liberian Freemasonry were Presidents Joseph Jenkins Roberts, William David Coleman, Charles D.B. King, and William V.S. Tubman. End quote. Liberia, Portrait of...
My people, because whatsoever education I acquired as a dear sacrifice of over 300 years, I shall use for the salvation of the 400 million black people of the world. And the day when I forsake my people, may God Almighty say there shall be no one like for you. I unequivocally rejected the racist assumption of much white American Christianity, namely that God had created the black man inferior and that he had intended Negroes to be a servant class, heroes of wood and cars of water. Well, I predicated my view of man and the doctrine of Imago Dei. All men, regardless of color, are created in the image of God. Now, from this premise followed the equality of all men and the brotherhood of all men. The biblical injunction of Acts 17:26 reminds us that he created of one blood all nations of men that dwell on the face of the earth. I was most interested in brotherhood within his own race, because if Negroes are created in God's image and Negroes are black, then God must in some sense be black. If the white man has the idea of a white God, let him worship his God as he desires. We have found a new ideal, because whilst our God has no color, and yet it is human to see everything through horns and spectacles, and since the white people have seen their God through their white spectacles, we have only now started to see our God through our own spectacles. But we believe in the God of Ethiopia, the everlasting God, God of Father, God of Son, God of Holy Ghost, the one God of all ages. That is the God in whom we believe, but we shall worship him through the spectacles of Ethiopia. For 250 years we have struggled under the burden and weight of slavery. We were maimed, we were brutalized, we were ravaged in every way. We are men. We have hopes, we have passions, we have feelings, we have desires just like any other race. The cries raised all over the world of Canada for the Canadians, of America for the Americans, of England for the English, of France for the French, of Germany for the Germans. You're taking unreasonable, we the blacks of the world should raise the cry of Africa for the Africans. The Negro is a man, we represent the new Negro. His back is not yet against the wall. We do not want his back against the wall because that would be a peculiar and desperate position. We do not want him there. It is because of this that we are asking for fair compromise. When the Belgians have control of the Belgian Congo, which they cannot use, they have not the resources to develop nor the intelligence. The French have more territory than they can develop. There are certain parts of Africa in which they cannot live at all. So it is for you to come together and give us a United States of Africa. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We are not going to be a race without a country. God never intended it, and we are not going to use God's confidence in us as men. We are men, human beings, capable of the same act as any other race. Possessing on the first circumstances the same intelligence as any other race. Now Africa's been sleeping, not dead, only sleeping. Today Africa's walking around not only on our feet, but on our brains. You can enslave what was done for 300 years the bodies of men. You can shackle the hands of men. You can shackle the feet of men. You can imprison the bodies of men. But you cannot shackle or imprison the minds of men. Rise down, black men, and take. Reach up, black men and women, and pull our nature's knowledge to you. Turn ye around and make a conquest of everything, north and south, east and west. And then when you have wrought well, you will have merited God's blessing, you will have become God's chosen people, and naturally you will become leaders of the world. And as you bow down to the white man today, so a lot of races bow down to you, God, you will let the marches because of the superiority of your mind and your achievement. Because no race has the last word on culture and civilization. They do not know what we are capable of. They do not know what we are thinking. They're thinking in terms of dreadnoughts, bubble ships, aeroplanes, submarines. You know what we're thinking about? That is our own private business.
When Marcus Garvey arrived in Harlem in 1916 to expand his organization, he faced several major challenges. First, with a class and cultural divisions. Many Southern-born African Americans in Harlem were very skeptical of Garvey's Jamaican background and working-class demeanor. The black elite, including W.E.B. Du Bois, viewed Garvey's separatist and nationalist rhetoric as unsophisticated or even dangerous. Also, many black veterans returning from the First World War faced intensified racism and violence. Garvey's message of black pride and self-determination resonated with working-class members, but drew many criticism from the integrationist elite. Building the UNIA's infrastructure, including its newspaper, The Negro World, and the ambitious Black Starline shipping company, required massive fundraising and logistical coordination, which invited many scrutinies and eventual legal troubles. John Edward Bruce, also known as Bruce Grit, was a journalist, historian, and civil rights activist who played a pivotal role in Garvey's rise. Bruce was a respected member of Prince Hall Masonry, and he allegedly was responsible for bringing Garvey into the order. This move was strategic, as Freemasonry provided Garvey access to a network of influential black men committed to racial uplift and solidarity. Freemasonry's emphasis on discipline, secrecy, and fraternal bonds aligned well with Garvey's vision of a unified global black movement. Bruce's Masonic connections helped legitimize Garvey among skeptical African Americans and provided a framework for organizing UNIA chapters. Bruce's contributions to the UNIA went far beyond clerical duties. And in a sense, he was the intellectual architect of the organization. Bruce was a Pan-African nationalist who co-founded the Negro Society for Historical Research alongside Arthur Schomburg. His writings and speeches emphasized black pride, historical consciousness, and self-help. Garvey referred to Bruce as a grand old man of the movement. Bruce's experience in journalism and activism helped shape the UNIA's messaging and organizational structure. As a respected figure in both Freemasonry and black intellectual life, Bruce helped Garvey navigate Harlem's complex social terrain and build alliances across class and ideological lines. While Garvey was a charismatic leader and visionary, Bruce was arguably the movement's intellectual backbone. He provided historical grounding, strategic advice, and institutional credibility. His influence extended into the UNIA's educational and cultural initiatives, helping frame Garveyism as a serious ideological movement rather than mere populist rhetoric. In short, Bruce was not just a secretary. He was a mentor, a strategist, and an ideological architect of the UNIA's success. Muhammad Ali, a Sudanese Egyptian intellectual, journalist, and Pan-Africanist, was a big influence on Marcus Garvey's activism. The two men met in London around 1912 when Ali was the editor of the African Times and Orient Review, a pioneering Pan-African and Pan-Islamic journal. Garvey contributed articles to this publication, and through their collaboration, he was exposed to Ali's ideas on black self-determination, anti-colonialism, and global black unity. Ali's worldview emphasized the unity of African peoples across the diaspora and the importance of reclaiming African heritage and pride. His Pan-African and Pan-Islamic teachings laid an intellectual foundation that resonated with Garvey, who would later incorporate similar themes into the UNIA organization. Ali's motto for his later organization, the Universal Islamic Society, one God, one aim, one destiny, was later echoed in Garvey's own teachings and slogans. While Ali did not directly help draft the formal philosophical or organizational structure of the UNIA, his influence on Garvey's thinking was profound. Garvey's emphasis on African pride, economic self-sufficiency, and global solidarity among people of African descent can be traced back in part to his intellectual connection to Ali. Ali was more of a catalyst than a co-founder of the organization. Ali's work in journalism also influenced Garvey's use of media. The Negro World, the UNIA's newspaper, mirrored the model laid out by Ali for his newspaper, the African Times and the Orient Review, using print media as a tool for consciousness raising and mobilization. To say Muhammad Ali was a crucial and early mentor for Marcus Garvey, helping to shape the Pan-African and nationalist framework that would later define the UNIA. However, the detailed philosophical and organizational structure of the UNIA was largely Garvey's own creation, built upon but not directly co-authored by Ali's foundational ideas.
UNIA was that it would teach success. It was going to be a vehicle to communicate and demonstrate that black people could be successful. This idea of success was now translated into a whole series of commercial ventures. Laundries, restaurants, newspapers.
Toward the end of achieving economic support for his vision, Garvey established the Black Starline in June 1919 to operate a worldwide network of steamships. Emulating the successful white-owned steamship companies, Garvey's plans for the Black Starline included providing passage for blacks to the reclaimed homelands in Africa, providing a financial base for support of the UNIA movement, and earning respect for black enterprises through a successful showing of the UNIA flag. Garvey offered shares of stock in the new company at $5 per share, and within a year, the line had raised $610,000 and owned 3 ships. This was a huge success in motion, but some things were at stake. UNIA businesses had begun to flounder, as Garvey was into hiring managers with little or no experience. Not that he could be blamed for this. Blacks knew so little then, or knew nothing at all. As a consequence, Garvey was known to shifting funds from one company to cover the mounting losses accruing in another. Even if the business practices of the Black Starline's officers had been above reproach, the corporation still would have had great difficulty keeping its flag above water. And why? Its unwise purchase of dubious ships at exorbitant prices was a handicap from which even a more soundly managed company would have been hard put to survive. The thing was, Garvey needed more minds like himself on the table. There's no way to succeed for long with all the antagonisms and hate games going on, from the American government, worse still, from his own people. With the Black Starline, Garvey's own star rose and fell. Rather than providing a financial base for the UNIA, the Black Starline succeeded in draining the UNIA's assets, dragging the organization's other operations under with it. Garvey was forced to sell off property and equipment. Beset by problems, both internal and external, Garvey attempted to keep his fledgling steamship line afloat through the sale of more stock. This sale of stock, or more precisely Garvey's stock solicitation through the mail, led to his arrest, conviction, and eventual deportation for mail fraud. Garvey was indicted on 13 counts of mail fraud in February of 1922. However, the indictment and subsequent trial are not isolated events. They must be viewed in the historical context of Garvey's struggle with the existing power structure. There are several aspects of the trial and the circumstances leading up to it that illuminate a discussion of the power phenomenon. Number one, the atmosphere of hostility surrounding Garvey before and during the trial. Number two, the extensive government surveillance Garvey was under, surveillance that shaped the outcome of the trial. And three, whether or not Garvey received an unbiased, fair trial. Garvey's indictment coincided with a vigorous "Garvey must go" campaign. This was even spearheaded by several prominent Negro leaders who vehemently opposed Garvey's programs for no justifiable reason, although the attack centered on the allegations that Garvey was a charlatan bent on milking the poor, ignorant masses of black people. Garvey's own mismanagement of the Black Starline and his overly optimistic declarations of how close the race was to achieving the repatriation of Africa fed the "Garvey must go" hysteria. Garvey also became the black media's target for character assassination. W.E.B. Du Bois, a black man with his political influence at the time, who could have joined forces with Garvey for the betterment of blacks, whose liberation he claimed to champion, was in the forefront of the campaign against Marcus Garvey. He had written an article critically evaluating the Black Starline's finances, questioning the existence of worthless ships, and calling to task the habit of selling passenger tickets on non-existent ships scheduled to sail to Liberia. Du Bois accused Garvey of robbing his investors, dishonesty, a lack of knowledge and experience, and of using the mails in furtherance of a scheme to defraud and conspiring to do so. And the talk about Liberia, this clearly had to do with sabotage. Du Bois had played a glaring role in this, which makes some wonder now what Du Bois' true motive or ambition for black Americans had been all along. Du Bois was from a more privileged background and felt he could improve the condition of African Americans by working with liberal whites in the U.S. through the organization he co-founded with whites in 1909, the NAACP, National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. The NAACP was meant as a civil rights organization championing liberation and equality for people of color. But come to think of it, how could the NAACP have functioned in tune with the black dream if it was controlled by several wealthy whites in the background? Garvey, on the other hand, grew up in an impoverished Jamaican community. He believed in blacks helping blacks without any dependence on whites. This he'd always known to be true liberation. The philosophy of both men differed. Garvey would recall how his disappointment was offset by the peculiarity of what he had witnessed in the NAACP offices when he went visiting Du Bois to personally invite him to one of his events. The stark absence of colored staff among the officers of a supposedly colored organization was troubling. Garvey claimed to have been perplexed and unable to tell whether he was in a white office or that of the NAACP. All these put together would hurt Du Bois, no doubt. For a fact, he was the director-in-front and editor-in-chief of NAACP's monthly magazine, The Crisis. With Liberia having economic trouble due to corruption and mismanagement, Garvey had construction loan program from which he successfully raised a $2 million fund, which he offered to the government in exchange for the settlement of his people there. This happened in 1921, October 17th. The Universal Negro Improvement Association, UNRA, had a large and growing presence in Liberia already. High-ranking members of the government and ordinary Liberian citizens were members of the UNRA or followers of Marcus Garvey, including former Presidents Arthur Barkley and Daniel E. Howard. Then President Charles D.B. King had welcomed the UNRA to Liberia and invited it to establish headquarters in the country. This would mean that the Liberian government and Marcus Garvey were already in good rapport and working together towards fulfilling the goal in sight. Liberia was selected as the base for the establishment of the great African nation. Garvey envisioned the West African nation as the rightful home of those wanting to return to Africa. Jamaicans.com had reported thus: Garvey wanted to settle in Liberia before white nations of Europe robbed Liberia of its autonomy under the guise of friendship. Meanwhile, Du Bois had maneuvered through his high-powered contacts to get himself appointed Ambassador Extraordinary of the United States so he could attend the second inauguration of Charles King as the President of Liberia. During this time, Du Bois developed a relationship with King. Shortly after, the experts and engineers of Garvey's UNIA would, as planned, arrive in Liberia to prepare for resettlement and were immediately deported on the instruction of Liberian President Charles King. This was clearly unanticipated. The new Liberian president had no doubt been influenced by his new acquaintance, Du Bois. The slave rebellion reported thus: the inviolable truth is, Du Bois had worked very closely with the U.S. State Department to destroy the UNIA movement in Liberia and had taken steps to hamper the construction and resettlement plan. The more complicated truth, which was also known, has less to do with Americo-Liberian hegemony than a curious combination of French, British, and American interests in Africa. This, the Liberian listener reported. All the powers then were against Garvey's mission and would do anything to quash it. All kinds of schemes had begun to come into play. In a New York News editorial, Garvey was accused of preying on the prejudice and imagination of blacks and having seduced from them hundreds of thousands of dollars and squandered upon self-glorification and visionary projects. The editorial referred to Garvey as a despotic dreamer and a menace to his people and the United States, who was not only bankrupting his race, but fast leading it to untimely bloodshed and suicide. Additionally, in the white media, Garvey was portrayed as a racial agitator, stirring up hatred against whites. Still another major line of attack focused on Garvey's plan to send black people back to Africa, which was portrayed as a foolish effort to get back to the jungle. A.P. Randolph ridiculed Garvey's scheme of conquering Africa for Negroes, declaring that the Garveyites had neither the brains nor the capital to run a steamship line, much less build an empire. All these were done to simply discourage and thwart a life-changing phenomenon which was already in movement. There were also forces at work to destroy the black.
book Catholicism and the Roots of Nazism, Derek Hastings explores the early connection between Catholicism and the Nazi movements in Munich, revealing a complex and often overlooked relationship that shaped the ideological framework of Nazism before its eventual break with the church. Hastings argued that the Nazi movement initially drew support from Catholic circles in Munich, which was a predominantly Catholic city. Many early Nazi leaders and supporters were devout Catholics who saw National Socialism as compatible with their religious and nationalistic ideals. The book examines how early Nazis promoted a vague, non-denominational form of Christianity that appealed to Catholic and Protestant audiences alike, before the movement evolved into a pseudo-religious cult centered on the fanaticism of Hitler. After a failed coup in the year 1923, Nazism began distancing itself from Catholicism, transforming into a more radical, anti-clerical, and messianic movement. Hastings traces this ideological shift and its implications for the Nazi relationship with religion. Hastings introduces the concept of a Catholic-Nazi synthesis, a brief period when Catholic identity and Nazi ideology were intertwined. This synthesis peaked in the early 1920s, but was later abandoned as Nazism became more totalitarian and anti-religious. The book challenges the common perception that Catholicism was always opposed to Nazism, showing instead that early Catholic support helped legitimize and shape the movement. By concentrating on Munich and Bavaria, Hastings provides a micro-historical lens that reveals how local religious culture influenced national political developments. In the book The Nazi Occult War, Hitler's Compact with the Forces of Evil by Michael Fitzgerald, he explores a deep and disturbing connection between Nazism and occult ideology, arguing that mystical beliefs significantly influenced the Third Reich's rise and actions. Fitzgerald presents a compelling narrative that the Nazi regime, particularly its early leadership, was heavily influenced by occultism, mysticism, and an esoteric tradition. The book suggests that Adolf Hitler and his inner circle were not only politically radical, but also spiritually extreme, drawing on arcane beliefs to justify their ideology and actions. The book traces how secret societies and mystical movements like the Vril Society and the Thule Society shaped early Nazi thought, blending nationalism with esoteric and pseudo-scientific ideas. Fitzgerald examines the Nazis' obsession with ancient symbols like the swastika, Norse mythology, and the myth of Atlantis as a supposed Aryan homeland. The book discusses the existence of a Nazi occult bureau, a shadowy organization tasked with researching and exploiting supernatural forces for the regime's benefit. The Nazis' racial theories were often couched in mystical language, with references to lost civilizations, cosmic destiny, and spiritual purity. Interestingly, Fitzgerald also explores how resistance movements and allied forces allegedly use occult practices to counteract Nazi influence, including rituals and psychic warfare. Rather than treating these beliefs as fringe or irrelevant, Fitzgerald argues that occultism was central to the Nazi worldview, especially in the early years. He portrays the Nazi leadership as engaging in a compact with evil, using mystical ideology to manipulate the masses and justify atrocities. The book is written in a very accessible and narrative-driven style, blending historical research with many speculative elements. In essence, the Nazi occult war offers a chilling look at how irrational and mystical beliefs can be weaponized by political movements with devastating consequences. So now we all know what the real motivations of these Knights of Malta really were. These Knights of Malta were in fact some deranged occultists and Freemasons. who had all of these crazy beliefs in Aryan supremacy and even invaded other countries in search of artifacts to prove all of their deranged ideology. Now, what these Knights of Malta didn't expect when they challenged the mighty Ethiopian Empire was that the Prince Hall Masons of the Western world would rally Africans all around the world to come to the aid of the Emperor Haile Selassie.
Prophetic to the divine Messiah. Leonard Howe taught that there are 6 principles to Rastafari theology. 1. Hatred for whites. 2. The complete superiority of the black race. 3. Revenge on whites for their wickedness. 4. The negation, persecution, and humiliation of the government of Jamaica. 5. Preparation to go back to Africa. 6. Acknowledging Emperor Haile Selassie as a supreme being and the only ruler of black people.
Leonard Percival Howell, we call him Gang.
Leonard Howell was the first one to point to Haile Selassie as the Black Messiah.
He didn't bring a religion, he was just telling you the God truth.
Rubbish everything we have. Rubbish everything I left up our face. This patry from Jamaica.
That man is a man where the government fight. Fighting very hard, and he fights them very hard.
And she Satan out of alternative conspiracies about a fake death, his resurrection, his second coming, or his spiritual force being released into the world. However, as no Pan-African change materialized, the Rastafari movement lost momentum. Among black communities, rap replaced Rasta-style reggae as the musical force for revolution and political change. However, Rastafarian imagery and language continues to dominate pro-African movements in the West. The emphasis on Haile Selassie has mostly been exchanged for militant socialism and deification of the individual. It's merely honoring the original lyrics, or if we still believed that the now deceased King Haile Selassie was still God Almighty. Probably the former.
In Jamaica, we always worship a white Christ and a white king and a white queen. They didn't learn us anything of a black king. So when I saw a photograph of a black king in the front page of the Daily Gleaner, I said to my father, I never know we have a black king. He said, yes man. I said, how you know? He said, it was called 1930 in Ethiopia. 52 nations went to his coronation. I said, then how can I know about it? He said, read your Bible.
Late 19th and 20th centuries, Ethiopia stood as a rare symbol of African independence during a time of European colonial expansion. When Italy attempted to assert control over Ethiopia during the First Ethiopian and Italian War, and later in the Second Ethiopian-Italian War, the Ethiopian army resistance employed a range of unconventional strategies that defied European military expectations. Ethiopia's imperial structure allowed Emperor Menelik II and later Haile Selassie to rally a vast decentralized army composed of regional lords and their militias. These forces were not a standing army in the European sense, but were deeply embedded in local communities. This allowed for rapid mobilization and a high degree of motivation as soldiers were defending their own land and culture. The terrain as a weapon. Ethiopian generals exploited the country's rugged topography, its mountains, valleys, and highlands to their advantage. During the decisive Battle of Bois in 1896, Ethiopian armies used their superior knowledge of the terrain to encircle and ambush Italian armies, which was unfamiliar with the landscape and overextended its supply lines. In the 1930s, Ethiopian armies again used the highlands to launch surprise attacks and evade Italian mechanized units. Guerrilla warfare and sabotage. During the Italian occupation from 1936 to 1941, Ethiopian resistance fighters known as the Abana or Patriots resorted to guerrilla tactics. They ambushed Italian convoys, sabotaged infrastructure, and assassinated all collaborators. These tactics frustrated Italian efforts to establish control and required the deployment of a large number of troops to secure even the smallest areas. The use of psychological and symbolic warfare. Ethiopian generals understood the power of symbolism. Haile Selassie's 1936 speech to the League of Nations, though not a battlefield tactic, galvanized international sympathy and reinforced Ethiopian morale. On the ground, Ethiopian fighters often used traditional war chants, religious icons, and cultural rituals to inspire unity and fearlessness amongst their ranks. The use of traditional weapons and tactics against modern arms. Despite being outgunned, Ethiopian forces in both wars used traditional weapons such as spears, swords, and even outdated rifles with remarkable effectiveness. In the Battle of Bois, they overwhelmed Italian positions with sheer numbers in close-quarter combat. In the 1930s, they adapted by targeting Italian supply lines and avoiding direct confrontations with tanks and aircraft whenever possible. Strategic alliances and diplomacy. Menelek's earlier diplomatic efforts to secure arms and support from Russia and France were proved to be crucial in 1896. Though Ethiopia was largely isolated in the 1930s, the resistance still benefited from smuggled weapons and moral support from anti-fascist movements abroad. These unconventional methods, rooted in Ethiopia's geography, culture, and decentralized military structure, enabled the country to achieve a stunning victory in 1896 and sustain a prolonged resistance to the brutal Italian occupation. The legacy of these tactics remains a powerful testament to the resilience of a nation that refused to be colonized. British played a direct military role in liberating Ethiopia from Italian occupation during World War II, while African Americans offered symbolic and material support, though only a small number actually traveled to fight. When Italy invaded Ethiopia in 1935, the League of Nations failed to stop the aggression. However, after Italy joined the Axis powers in 1940, the dynamic shifted. Great Britain became Ethiopia's most significant ally in the fight to expel the Italians. British and Commonwealth forces, including troops from South Africa, India, and African colonies, launched a coordinated campaign from Sudan and Kenya in 1940 to the year 1941. They attacked Italian positions in Eritrea, Somalia, and Ethiopia, culminating in a decisive battle in the year 1941 where the Italian forces surrendered. The British worked closely with the Ethiopian patriots known as the Abanak, supplying them with weapons, training, and strategic coordination. Colonel Ord Wingate led the Anglo-Ethiopian mission to help unify and direct the resistance. The restoration of Haile Selassie. The British facilitated Emperor Haile Selassie's return from exile. He re-entered Ethiopia in January 1941 and helped rally resistance forces, eventually reclaiming Addis Ababa in May of 1941. The United States, constrained by neutrality laws before entering World War II, did not provide direct military aid during the initial conflict. However, American support came in other forms. Diplomatic pressure. The U.S. government condemned Italy's invasion, and American civil society, especially African Americans, mobilized in protest. After the U.S. entered World War II, it supported Allied operations in Africa more broadly, which indirectly benefited Ethiopia's liberation. The Italian invasion of Ethiopia struck a deep chord in the Black American community, which saw Ethiopia as a symbol of Black independence and pride. while thousands of African Americans rallied in support, only a small number actually traveled to fight. Many African Americans attempted to enlist in Ethiopia's defense, but U.S. laws and logistical barriers made it difficult. A few individuals such as John C. Robinson, a pilot known as the Brown Condor, did in fact make it to Ethiopia and served in the country's Air Force. African American newspapers, churches, civic groups raised funds and lobbied the U.S. government. The Harlem community in New York was especially active, with some volunteers attempting to reach Ethiopia via Europe or the Caribbean. While exact figures are elusive, only a handful, probably less than 1,000, Black Americans reached Ethiopia to take part in the war. The impact was more symbolic than military, but the efforts helped galvanize Pan-African solidarity and anti-fascist sentiments in the U.S.
They saw Ethiopia as a special symbol of the whole continent. Until now, it alone had not been seized by white Europeans. Such people volunteered to fight for Haile Selassie, although only a handful managed to go, or they organized to send relief.
Black Americans rallied towards the cause, and Black Jamaicans likewise. So, the organization was formed in New York, 105th to 111th Avenue, New York, and as Ethiopian Repatriation Incorporated.
Hey, check that. Walking flag of Ethiopia.
The man must have a red, gold and green and the pants to ride.
Come on, fella, to ride. Yeah, Jay! Star!
Eli, may I drink? Peace to the eye. Rastafarians. One love.